Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're diving into a seriously fascinating intersection between art and society. We're going to explore how performative arts don't just, sit there looking pretty, they actively claim space. They act as this raw form of resistance during times of massive social upheaval. We'll look at how the very concept of a stage can actually transform from a place of simple performance right into a literal battleground for political realities.
So, this brings us to a huge question. Is theater just entertainment, or is it a political tool? It really challenges our fundamental assumptions about the whole purpose of a stage, doesn't it? Like, is it merely a place we go to just escape reality for a couple of hours, or is it a mechanism to actively shape and confront that reality? As we go through this explainer, we're going to unpack this by hitting on some very specific historical touchpoints.
Okay, let's dive into the roadmap. First up, Bühnen des Widerstands, or stages of resistance. Second, we'll look at 1976 and the arena occupation. Third, flight and theater in 2015. Fourth, crossing borders. And finally, we'll tackle the question of who speaks for whom.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, Stages of Resistance.
Now, our source material starts with this core premise. The relationship between art production and social movements is deeply, inextricably entwined. It's like a giant, complex puzzle. When societies experience these massive shifts, public spaces often turn into literal stages, right? Marginalized groups use performative action to make sure their voices are actually heard. To really grasp modern theatrical activism, we need to look at a specialized term highlighted by director Asli Kishla in our sources, which is post-migrant theater. Now, this isn't about pointing at a group and saying, hey, look at their story. No, it's about operating on a totally equal footing. The sources call this Augenhöhe. It's an attempt by modern theater to reflect a diverse society by creating a shared we, instead of falling into those old stereotypical traps of dividing society into an us versus them. It avoids instrumentalizing people, and instead it builds a totally new, shared reality right there on stage.
Moving on to Section 2, 1976, the arena occupation. To fully appreciate how this modern theatrical activism works, we've got to rewind a bit. We're going back to Vienna's St. Mark's district in the year 1976. Here, we encounter this concept of proletan passion. This was a form of proletarian-influenced theater, and it was used not just as a play, but as a direct, aggressive tool for agitation. Representatives of all sorts of marginalized subcultures used these dramaturgical forms to mobilize people, to literally claim physical space, and to demand a center where their specific subcultural needs could actually be lived out.
And this brilliantly illustrates how art and activism just completely merge. In 1976, an actual abandoned slaughterhouse, complete with the absolute grit and grime of physical labor, was occupied and transformed into a stage for the working class. The so-called arena Besetzung, or arena occupation, became this massive cultural and political upheaval against the established traditional cultural apparatus of the time. The space itself literally became part of the performance and the protest.
All right, Section 3, 2015, flight and theater.
So let's fast forward to the 2010s and the long summer of migration in 2015. We start to see a really fascinating thematic shift here. Think about it. In 1976, the stage was an abandoned slaughterhouse, addressing subcultural, working-class needs through proletarian theater. But by 2015, the physical occupation of space had evolved into a socio-political occupation of space. We're talking university auditoriums and churches being occupied to address the needs of refugees, utilizing that post-migrant theater concept we talked about. The tactical use of space for visibility, that remained totally crucial. But the actors and the stages themselves, they completely shifted.
We can actually track this modern movement through a rapid succession of events that started just before the big 2015 peak. Okay, so late 2012, a refugee protest camp forms at Sigmund Freud Park in Vienna. Fast forward a bit to winter, and this movement seeks sanctuary by physically occupying the votive kirche. That's a major church, right? And they're doing this to demand rights and visibility. Then, by early 2013, with the help of the charity Caritas, they actually relocate to a monastery. What's wild here is how these groups transformed everyday public and sacred spaces, places you might literally walk past on your morning commute, into these highly visible platforms. This effectively blurred the lines between political activism and performative action.
During this period, the crisis manifested super deeply within the arts in three really specific ways. First up, Nobel laureate Elfriede Jelinek wrote the play Die Schutzbefohlenen, which directly addressed the crisis. Second, you had the activist art collective Centrum für politische Schönheit executing these highly provocative public performances. And third, grassroots initiatives, like the Zoom-Flucht Punch, started popping up on university campuses. They were turning traditional holiday gathering spaces into literal stages for solidarity and political discourse.
Now for Section 4, Crossing Borders.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how it brings us to literal geographical borders, but also metaphorical, legal, and artistic demarcations. And it shows how performative actions actively challenge these lines. Consider this incredibly powerful quote from playwright Bertolt Brecht. He said, "The passport is the noblest part of a human being." Think about that for a second. This statement unpacks a pretty harsh reality. Identity, legal rights, and the very safety of the naked human are almost entirely dictated by paper borders. Without the right piece of paper, a person's very existence in a space becomes legally precarious, and that makes the border a profound, highly charged site of political tension.
So, who are the actors at these borders? Well, according to the sources, we can identify three main types of border crossers. First, you have the refugees themselves, who are navigating the literal physical boundaries. Then you have Fluchthelfer, or smugglers, who facilitate this movement, whether legally or illegally. And finally, and this is absolutely crucial for our topic today, you have artists and activists. These individuals actually become border violators themselves when their artistic actions intentionally blur the line between, legal compliance and political performance.
And a prime example of this intense boundary pushing is an action called Die die Toten kommen, or The Dead Are Coming, staged by the Zentrum für politische Schönheit. They actually attempted to physically dig graves and bury victims who tragically died crossing the Mediterranean, and they tried to do it right in front of the German Reichstag. I mean, this was an incredibly provocative action. It was meticulously designed to push the boundaries of fiction, reality, and government order, basically forcing a political confrontation through a pure performative act.
Which leads us to Section 5, Who Speaks for Whom? So the crucial point is, when theater and activism merge this intensely around vulnerable populations, it brings up a really vital ethical dilemma. Ask yourself, are we creating a genuine platform for unheard voices, or are we just feeding a pity machine? There is a very real danger of voyeurism in this kind of art. The sources emphasize that it's absolutely necessary to break down the hierarchies between the creators of the art and the subjects of the performance. You have to ensure the work empowers people rather than just exploiting them.
And sometimes these performative spaces become literal ideological battlegrounds. Take May 2016, for example. There was a performance of Jelinek's The Schutz bevorlenen at the University of Vienna's Automax, and it actually featured refugees as actors. Well, it was physically stormed by the right-wing identitarian movement. Fake blood was thrown, physical altercations broke out, the whole shebang. This highly polarized event really demonstrates the extreme risks and the intense political charge that's present when the stage mirrors the raw fractures of society.
But on the flip side, performative activism also manifests as highly practical, community-building work. Take that Zoom-Flucht Punch initiative we mentioned earlier. It sounds surprising, but simply setting up a festive punch stand at the university became this radical act of self-empowerment. By doing this, they actually managed to creatively circumvent bureaucratic employment bans for asylum seekers. It was operated directly by newcomers, fostering real autonomy. They transformed an isolated, kind of quiet corner of the campus into a vibrant, shared space of solidarity. So it was performative, yes, for sure, but it yielded practical, genuinely community-driven results.
Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. If the stage mirrors reality, what play are we performing tomorrow? We've seen how from the slaughterhouses of Vienna in 1976, all the way to the borders of Europe in 2015, performative art doesn't just reflect society. It actively claims space within it. It challenges borders, confronts us with super difficult ethical questions, and creates a shared reality. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the intersection of culture and politics. Keep questioning the spaces around you, and I'll see you in the next explainer.